Hey everyone, this is Alec, the Daring Lime. In this video, I'm going to be making a tier list for all the Marvel Champions villains up to the Age of Apocalypse. I just got the Age of Apocalypse, so I wanted to get all my thoughts down on the villains before I try that, and then I can go update this video after. I've been wanting to do this for a while because this is one of my favorite games, and obviously I want to talk about it. So the way I set this up is alignment chart because I feel like a tier list, I would have to say like do it by difficulty or by fun. And with this, I can do it both ways. So I thought this would be better. Also, it will more accurately capture my thoughts on the villains. So now let's get into it. These villains aren't in alphabetical order, roughly. It looks like. I don't know. I didn't make the order here, but I'll start off with Absorbing Man. Absorbing Man is from the Rise of Red Skull, which I've played through a few times, and he isn't very hard. Uh, this tier is going to be like all the way to the left is going to be like I've never lost to them, which I don't think I've ever lost to Absorbing Man, even on expert. So he's definitely going to be all the way over here on easy. Uh, Fun. I don't know. I do think he's fun. I'm going to keep him on average right now, and then move him around. Actually, no. I'll start with Rhino. I'll get him on the tier list now because Rhino is also he's very simple. He's not a lot going on, but he's not easy. And his difficulty changes a lot depending on the player count. So in two player and up, he's not difficult at all. And then as the player count increases or decreases, he gets much more difficult because the threat on his main scheme is low. So for one player, I would probably put him somewhere in here. I think he's decently fun, especially when you're playing Spider-Man. Such a thematic matchup. I think Rhino is probably slightly more fun than average, and his difficulty I'll leave him slightly more difficult than average if I assume this to be average. I think that's about right for Rhino. And then using that to like think about Absorbing Man, he's definitely easier than Rhino. The delay counters that he has don't really they're not really that scary. Then even on expert, as soon as you get rid of his side scheme that gives him all of the traits, he's not difficult at all. I don't think he's I don't know. I'll leave him over here for now. I do think he's pretty fun. I don't think he's as fun as Rhino, so I'll put him right here. Next villain, Collector. So this I'll add both of these on for now. So the Collector is one of my least favorite scenarios, I'd say. I'll start with this one. I'm pretty sure this one is the one where he's adding your cards into the collection, which is a mechanic that I don't really enjoy. I've never enjoyed playing it. And then the first time I went through this campaign was using the Rocket and Groot starter decks that come in it, and it felt so awful playing Rocket, and then all of your upgrades when they're out of counters will go into the collection, so you can't really use your Tinker ability very well. And then hit the fact that his own minions and side schemes will go into the collection as well makes it a very difficult scenario. I don't think it's one of the hardest, but it's definitely difficult and it's not fun. It's maybe not the least fun in the game, but it's not fun. This one is better. It's not the most. It's not. At least I haven't had so much trouble with this one as with the other one. So this is the one where you're trying to escape. It's definitely still hard. It's harder than Rhino, uh, and it's a little bit more fun than the Collector. But I don't particularly enjoy either of these. Um, Now on to Crossbones. Crossbones is pretty fun as well. I like him. I don't think I like him more than Rhino, and he's definitely harder than Absorbing Man. Uh, so I'll throw him. I'll throw him here for now. I don't. at least in two player, I think that he is harder than Rhino. Yeah, two player he's definitely harder than Rhino, but I'm gonna think about this. I know most people that watch this are probably gonna be playing solo, so my I'll do it based off one player or one or maybe like one and a half player for this tier list. So here I'd put him probably here for now. He's probably one of around the average difficulty. I find him a little less fun than Rhino and a little easier than Rhino in solo. Now on to Drang. Drang is probably my favorite villain from the Guardians box. I actually really enjoy it. The I really like fighting the Badoons, just getting swarmed by a bunch of little grunts. It reminds me of fighting the grunts in Halo, kind of, and it's a blast. The ship gives you the extra wild resources, which can make your heroes really strong. And I have a great time playing him. He's not. I've never lost to him. Uh, Even on expert, I've never lost. I think he's more difficult than Absorbing Man, so I'll put him over here. But he's pretty fun. And Ebony Maw. So Ebony Maw is interesting. He is variable in how difficult he is because the spell counters really change how you play. And there was actually the when I first started playing, I got Star Lord, and I dealt myself a bunch of encounter cards, and I kept getting the one that gets me stunned. So I remember I didn't realize that you couldn't be stunned more than once or confused more than once at that point when I was playing. So I had like two or three of each for stun and confused, and I lost horribly bad. But he's not actually that hard if you follow the rules. But he's a good time. I don't think everyone enjoys his gimmick, but I think his spell environments are really fun. I like planning around it. He's definitely harder than Rhino, especially on expert mode. And I do think I have more fun playing him than Rhino. So is he okay? So the difficulty, he's definitely easier than both of these. I think I'm gonna move these over slightly, like that, and I think I'll add him. I'll add him there. That feels about right for Ebony Maw. Hella okay. So the fun is definitely gonna be up here. I don't know exactly where, but the it feels like you're actually in a story when you're playing it. You're going through all the side schemes, getting all of those minions, and it's one of my favorite villains in the game. She has such an interesting mechanic with when you decide to flip her to her wounded side, and it changes her difficulty a lot. And you'll the first time you play her, if you don't figure it out immediately, you'll definitely lose pretty hard to her if you don't do it quite right, especially on expert. But she's a great villain. Uh, I think after you know how to beat her, she is easier than Ebony Maw, but before that, she's definitely harder. But she's more fun. So I'll probably place her about here. That feels about right. And the Hood. The Hood is I've only played him a couple times, but I had a great time playing him. He's kind of weird in the sense that uh he has all his cards don't do much, but the modulars do a lot. So you can like tell your own story with it, which I find that very fun. But it's not something that you're just gonna sit down and have a bunch of fun with. You have to plan around it, find a fun matchup. But so and I didn't have difficulty when I beat him, so I'll throw him around here for now. I do think he's very fun, and the more effort you put into him, his difficulty is variable because of the modulars, so he's somewhere depending on how you build him, he's somewhere in here like this. But for me personally, I'll put him uh fun and not super hard. That feels about right. And Kang the Conqueror. So Kang is actually one of my favorite villains in the game. He his in multiplayer especially, his mechanic is is maybe the best because getting split up and thrown throughout the timeline has been some of my favorite experiences playing. Every time I play with new people, not on their first game because he's kind of complicated, but a couple games in, I always like to bring out Kang, and I've played him in 4 player a couple times, 3 player a few times, a bunch in 2 player. I haven't played him solo, but you could always just play two-handed. Yeah, I don't see why you would want to play him in one-handed, but he's I'll put him at the top of fun for now. And the difficulty, I think he's probably somewhere in here. Because again, Hela gets easier the more that you play her. Ebony Maw is just difficult. Kang, he can his modular sets, especially if you do the I think it's called the Anachronauts and Master of Time instead of just using temporal, it can be very difficult. And depending on what hero you pick, it will be difficult. So I'll throw him up here for now. Yeah, now the next one, Claw. So Claw is sort of the standard villain when I think about Marvel Champions because he came in the core box and he's kind of stayed relevant the whole time. He's not particularly easy, but he's not particularly hard. So like I've played games where it feels I've just like beat him really easily with no difficulty at all, and with not even a very good deck. And then other times I've played a really good deck on standard against him, and it just went really bad and lost. So he's kind of swingy. It feels also like if his main scheme finishes, then you've basically lost. Because if it goes to the second side, you get that minion. And the Masters of Evil minions are really tough. They have a lot of health. It's almost like having a second villain out. So, and his side scheme that comes out that gives him the health makes it so he can't really rush him down. And an expert, he starts with that. So like I think in 1 player, it's debatable whether he's harder than Rhino or not, but he's definitely difficult. I think I'm gonna move all of these over a bit. Maw there, King there. I think he's about there. I don't really have that much fun. I do like him, but he's not anything special. I think thematically I like him a little less than Rhino, so I'll move him. I'll move him here. Definitely not a bad villain by any means. Great for testing decks, but not one that I'm like looking forward to play. But I do enjoy. I do enjoy playing him. So now we're on to Loki. So Loki is notorious for being annoying, because he switches out and then you get a different Loki. Sometimes there's Stalwart. Sometimes they scheme a lot. There's Retaliate. A lot of people don't like that, but I really like it. I don't pull him out all that much just because he has so much health and it's a lot to set him up with the Infinity Gauntlet. But I do enjoy the Infinity Gauntlet as well. It's one of my favorite modulars. Like throwing the Infinity Gauntlet on Rhino is a good time. So I like Loki quite a bit. I do think he's pretty hard. Uh, I don't know. I personally haven't had it. I've lost to Ebony Maw more than I've lost to Loki, but I don't think he's easier. I think that he he is more of a standard villain in a similar way to the Collector down here. Depending on what hero you're playing and what version of Loki you get, it can be a hard counter. So it's like variable. He's his difficulty is somewhere in here, depending on your hero and Loki combination. But I'll throw him probably here for now. But with a caveat of I never play Loki if I'm not in the mood to play Loki. If I was forced to sit down and play Loki, he'd definitely be less fun. But when I want to play Loki, it's a good time. And Magneto. Okay, so one of the final villain of the X-Men box. He has an interesting mechanic. So you have to thwart and do damage sort of all at once. You can't just rush him down, and you have to like infiltrate his base. It's very thematic, and I've I think I lost to him at one point randomly because of the magnet counters, and because of that he's difficult. But also once you learn to manage the magnet counters, it's not as difficult. It's just it can surprise you the first time you play him. So I don't think he's harder than Loki. Probably move it a little more difficult like that. Uh, yeah, I don't think he's harder than Loki. Thematically, he's really fun. I'd probably put him somewhere around here. Magog I've actually played a lot because it's such a simple scenario and you're just like brawling it out. It it's it's one of my go-to scenarios when I'm playing. It's sort of like an updated version of Rhino in the sense of it, he just hits you. The scheme doesn't really do much. It's just about dishing out damage, blocking damage, and it's sort of like a race. I like the extra mechanic of wooing the crowd. I think he's easier than Rhino. I've never, yeah, I've never lost to Magog either. So he must be much easier because I've played him like at least 10 times and I haven't lost to him yet. So he's got to go. He's got to go over here, I guess. But I do think he's difficult on expert. The only time I've taken him on expert, I was using a very strong deck and it wasn't easy. So he's on standard. He's one of the easiest villains. He's somewhere around similar to Absorbing Man in difficulty, maybe a little more. He's probably like somewhere in here on standard, and then on expert, he's on expert the difficulty slides up to. I got to think about expert now. Is he? Yeah, he's definitely more difficult on expert. He goes all the way up to here on expert, so I think the difficulty I'll just probably put him in the middle because he's pretty balanced, and then I do have a really fun time fighting him, so I'd probably put him here. Notice the line is forming right here. Okay, Toad. So immediately I have to put this on the top because this is one of my favorite scenarios in the game. It's the mansion one, and the whole idea of uh, managing what main scheme you're on and what villain you're on is really fun to me. Because depending on what deck you're playing, you're gonna want different. You're gonna want a different main scheme, and it can be, for instance, if you're playing leadership, you don't want the retaliate one because you want to actually be able to attack with your allies. But if that's the case, you can just let the main scheme finish. And it's fine because you can have a few of them finish before you actually lose. And it just adds so much decision making into the game. It's definitely not an easy scenario. On standard, it's been it's been really hard on standard a few different times. So I think I think I gotta move these two up and then Toad somewhere in here. Yeah, I'd probably put it about like that. That feels about right to me. Very fun, one of my favorite in the game. A difficult scenario, but not as difficult as the Guardian stuff. Now Master Malts, another X-Men one. I don't think I've lost to this scenario, but I haven't played it that many times either. And it hasn't been easy every time. It's just the Magneto ally. Actually, I don't think I've played this outside of campaign mode. So I can't speak to the difficulty too well because I haven't played it enough. But I did have fun. I had about a standard amount of fun, I'd say. So because I haven't played it that much, I'm just gonna throw it probably here for now because I do think it's more difficult than Rhino, uh, and probably about with Claw. Yeah, I'll put it there. Mojo. Okay, Mojo is very interesting. The storing threat on you and then having the different the different modular sets that shuffle in and then change which environment is out is really fun. Uh, Sort of like a final boss because it is a mini campaign. It's definitely more fun than Loki. Probably move that down slightly. Uh, Definitely more. Is it more difficult than Magneto? I don't think so. I have lost to Mojo, but it's never been that bad. I think I'd probably put it somewhere around here. It feels about right to me. It's one of the best villains, but again, it's such a complicated scenario that you have to be in the mood to play it. And then Green Goblin. So Green Goblin, I've played many times, especially in multiplayer. It's incredibly fun. The uh, the amount of minions that can the Goblin thralls that can swarm you gets ridiculous sometimes, and it really feels like you're in New York and the Green Goblin's overwhelming you with a bunch of minions, and you're trying to deal with everything, but it's difficult and it's super fun. It's one of my favorite scenarios in the game. I don't think it's as hard as these scenarios, so I gotta probably at the top of fun because like all of these scenarios, I'm down to play whenever, and it's not that hard. Probably something like that on the difficulty feels right because like I've seldom lost to this scenario. And but the only time I've played it on expert mode, I was playing very strong decks. I wasn't playing standard strength decks. So I won, but it was still difficult because you get the two encounter cards immediately, which can really mess things up. So I think it's probably something like that. Yeah, that feels right. Mysterio. So the Sinister Motives campaign, what was one of the I think the second campaign I got, and I had a blast with it. Mysterio though has always sort of fallen flat for me. I don't really lose to him, and I don't haven't had that much fun. He's not one of the ones I pull out of the box very often. And even though I don't have anything negative to say about it, the mechanic is interesting, and uh, the art is good. It feels thematic. I just for some reason I never play it, so I gotta put it down here. It's I think I just gotta move these down. Yeah, it's probably something like that. That's hard because like I wish that the fun was stretched out more because Mystery is definitely much more fun than these ones, but uh, yeah, I'd have to move everything up slightly to adjust for that. But yeah, it's somewhere in here for me. Less fun than absorbing. I think I've just got to move a couple of these up. Yeah, that feels about right. And then Nebula. Okay, so Nebula is one of. I actually quit playing the game for like 3 months after playing Nebula. It was again I was playing through the Guardians campaign with Rocket and Groot. At this point, I had abandoned the starter decks because it was just not working. But then when we got to Nebula, it was just we lost over and over and over again, and every time it wasn't fun. The evasion counters going up. It just feels like as soon as the main scheme, the first scheme flips, it's just game over because there's too many evasion counters, and the the attachments are a lot to keep track of. So it's like complicated to actually play. So you're focusing on what's going on a lot, and then also it doesn't feel fun. So like the difficulty of this scenario is difficult in a fun way to me, and same thing with Magneto. But then all of the difficulty in here just it just felt bad to me, and like the design of Nebula is very interesting. Same thing with a lot of the Guardians. Like all of these Guardians villains are very interesting, but the difficulty was just too high, and I got stuck in the campaign here, and I stopped playing forever. So she has to go on flip the table for me because it was just, if I could put her even lower, I probably would because this was my worst experience playing the game. Uh, yeah, I lost one time randomly with Doctor Strange against her because I just wanted to play through the campaign with Doctor Strange, beat it so that I could just move on, and I actually lost, which was incredible. The difficult. She's also variable in the difficulty because it's not. Sometimes her encounter cards don't do anything, and it just feels like, oh, that was easy. But then other times it just creates a chain of events that just go horrible for you, which is what happened that one game I played. And the fact that I could lose when playing the strongest hero in the game, and I think it's also the only time I've ever lost playing Doctor Strange was against Nebula. Because like to put it into perspective, I went through the first three scenarios in the campaign with Doctor Strange very easily, no difficulty at all. And then I got to Nebula, I randomly lost, and then played it again, and then won really easily. And that just, and then after that, I played Ronin with that same Doctor Strange deck and won in just like a few turns with full health. It wasn't difficult at all. But with Nebula, it can go so bad. So if I could, I would put her off the table. And Red Skull. Okay, Red Skull is a a very intriguing villain to me as well. His side scheme deck can become very overwhelming. especially if you're not playing someone that can thwart a lot. And it's so different. So, like it feels thematic for Red Skull that like as his schemes increase and there's more of them out there, he also gets stronger and harder to deal with. And I really enjoy that. He is a difficult villain, probably on par with Loki, somewhere in here. But he's also very fun. I think I need to play Magneto more. I played Red Skull more, but I'd probably put him about even with Magneto. That feels about right. Great villain. Now, Risky Business. So, Risky Business, the first time I played it, it was strange because it's not standard. Like these two, the Green Goblin and Norman Osborn, they came in the same pack, and this one was the first one I played because I was just following the story, and it was so interesting because it was like, okay, Norman Osborn is sitting there doing his like shady business dealings, and you're trying to stop him, but then when you flip him, he goes into the Green Goblin mode, deals a bunch of damage to you, and it's really hard to deal with. And so it becomes of like, flip how do I flip him at the right times when I'm ready to do a bunch of damage? And that's sort of interesting to figure out. But the downside of this scenario is that it feels like the you're supposed to just not ever flip the Green Goblin up and just sit there with Norman Osborn because he doesn't really do anything. And then you flip him up and one shot him, and that just it doesn't feel like there's that many other viable strategies to do it. And then there's so many turns in a row where nothing is going on. So unfortunately I don't like this very much. It's it's similar to Hello, where if you're doing it correctly, it's not that hard. But if you don't do it correct, it can be very difficult. So I think it's somewhere in here. It's not. It doesn't make me upset. It's like all of these sort of make me upset to play. This one's okay, but these two like actively make me not want to play the game, and this one doesn't do that at all. It's just lower. Now onto Ronin. So Ronin has a saving grace. Unlike these villains in the Guardian campaign, the final boss of it. So it's supposed to be a very difficult challenge. You can see that with Magneto, Red Skull, and Loki, that they all have something going on that's extra compared to a normal villain. And it's very difficult to deal with, but it's the final villain of the box, so it feels like it's supposed to be difficult to deal with. Like whenever you're going to sit down to play Ronin, you're sitting down to play Ronin. You're not just sitting down to play Marvel Champions. If you want to just play Marvel Champions, just pick any of these other villains in this zone. Ronin is very difficult. He hits you for like often like 8 to 10 damage, which hard to deal with. It feels like you have to spam status cards against him or spam allies, and there's not really that much to do. And he also throws out so many minions at you that are all difficult. So he's one of the hardest villains in the game. I think he's harder than these three. Yeah, he's definitely harder than these three. I'll put him at the top of hard. He's If you're just sitting down to play the game, he'd be all the way down here on fun. But because he is challenging in a way that's fun, and he's the final villain of the box, I think he's in here. Because like if you're in the mood to play Ronin, and it feels really good that he exists as like a test for your deck. Because you can always be like, yeah, I was able to beat Ronin on expert with this deck. This deck is great, and that's sort of the purpose he serves. And Marvel Champions wouldn't be the same without Ronin. I definitely am glad he exists, so I'm gonna have him in here for now. Sabretooth. Okay, Sabretooth is another weird experience I had. So I sat down to play the X-Men campaign. I just used the starter decks for Kitty Pryde and Colossus and lost to Sabretooth. And then I was like, okay, that was difficult, but maybe I just got unlucky. I played again, lost again. But then I made new decks to like, okay, let's build these decks just simply to beat Sabretooth. Lost again. So I was like 3 or 4 times that I sat down to start the X-Men campaign and didn't get through the first scenario. And I don't know if anyone else has had this experience, but he is I've had much more difficulty with Sabretooth than I have with Magneto, Red Skull, or Loki. Uh, he's similar to my win ratio. He's not quite as hard as Nebula, but also he's the same amount of difficult every time because he heals reliably, so you know what he's going to do, and you have the option to ready to after he attacks you to be able to block for Robert Kelly. So you know exactly what you're getting into when you play Sabretooth. It's just still very difficult. I think he's um probably in here in difficulty. Like maybe I've had a hard time with these. Don't think he's as hard as Ronin. Uh, and I get confused on whether I think he's fun or not because the way in which he's difficult is interesting and thematic and fun. But it's just so difficult that it starts to detract from the fun for me a bit. Uh, he's another one of those villains where I have to be in the mood to play Sabretooth to play him. And he feels like a barrier to entry to the X-Men box almost, which I don't know if that's a bad thing, but it's a very different experience than all of the other campaign boxes. So I think he's somewhere in here for me, where he's sort of I feel kind of neutral about him, and he's very difficult. And now Sandman. So Sandman is the first scenario for the Sinister Motives, and his indirect damage thing is interesting. It's like I think he's the only villain that does indirect damage with his normal attacks against you, which is pretty fun. So you have to think about him differently. Allies function differently, which is good because the whole chump blocking thing, it gets a little old when you're building decks and you're like, okay, I gotta have like at least 6 allies or so to have an ally to block every turn unless I'm full health. And it's nice that there's a villain in here. He's not very difficult, especially once you control the sand counters. But he does like, especially on expert, he gets the overkill as well. And I'm glad he exists. I don't play him that often. I don't have a bad time when I play him, but I don't have like a great time either. I think he's fairly below average for me. I guess average is somewhere in here. Like average is above the midline because I really like this game. But yeah, he's probably somewhere in here for me. See, he falls under a similar thing to Mysterio, and I don't have anything against Sandman. I just don't play him that much. But I think he's probably about there. So, because with Mysterio, it's his adding cards to your deck just takes too long, and Sandman can get out of control. So I think he's a little harder, and I have more fun. So I'll add him right there. Sentinels. This is funny to me because I have this memory when I was a kid of watching the first episode of the 90s TV show for X-Men, and this is just a recreation of that. It's like you're rescuing Jubilee from the mall with all the Sentinels, and it feels really cool. It's really fun. I like the idea of the side scheme turning into an ally. It can be a bit difficult. Uh, it's probably somewhere in here for me in this cluster of difficulty and on the fun side. I definitely like this one more than Master Mold. I'm not sure which is more difficult to be honest. It's something like that. And Doctor Octopus. So this is one of my favorite scenarios. I think it is my favorite scenario from the Spider-Man campaign. It's just the idea of like being trapped in a room with all of the Sinister Six and you can't win, so you have to just escape is really fun to me. And I like the interaction of how the villains work and the way they handle expert mode of just adding extra effects to the cards that only happen in expert was really creative, and it makes I really like that mechanic because the villains don't change, but all the cards get more difficult, and it's one of my go-to scenarios to play. It's extremely fun. It follows the thematics that I like out of Spider-Man with the Green Goblin and the Sinister Six, and it's a great time. How difficult is it though? Actually, uh, I'm not sure because I don't think it's that difficult. I've rarely lost to it. It can be a challenge. It can be a real challenge on expert mode. I'll put it probably somewhere in the average amount of difficulty. I do think I pull Green Goblin out of the box more than the Sinister Six, but it's definitely fun. It's a great time. I'll put it there. So Spiral now. Spiral is very another one of these Mojo mini campaigns. It's it's a weird scenario. So you have to. It has a mechanic similar to Hello where you have to play it correctly. She has her deck where you're trying to get to the card that allows you to damage her, and it's a fun mini game. It's definitely more difficult than Magog. I've personally had more trouble with it than Mojo, but I don't think it's actually more difficult. And for the fun, I'm conflicted because I just don't play it that much, but I do think it's very fun. And it's just one of those things where I need to be in the mood to play it. I don't like it as much as Toad, so do I like her more than Ebony Maw? It's probably similar. I feel this expansion with the Mojos being right in this fun difficulty range, it feels about right to me, and it's a very fun, it's a good pack. Taskmaster, so another Red Skull villain. He has that mechanic where when you flip up, you take damage. So if you flip down to recover, you know you're gonna take damage when you flip back up. So it kind of incentivizes you to stay in hero mode. And the yeah, I don't know. I don't have a lot to say about this one really. It feels just this is sort of like right here for me because it's not that difficult. It's fun, but not that fun. It feels this feels like sort of my like intersection point on all of these metrics. Thanos. Okay. Thanos is uh can be a very difficult villain. The introduced the Infinity Gauntlet, which is one of my favorite things. The thematics of it are great. I love what happens when the main scheme finishes and your deck is gone. It's sometimes it helps you depending on the hero you're playing. Sometimes it hurts you, but overall this is one of my more favorite scenarios. A lot of people don't like it because he's stalwart, which I mean, I get it. In the mechanics of the game, stalwart it's an annoying keyword, especially and it changes a lot depending on what hero you're playing. But thematically, with Thanos being as smart as he is and as powerful as he is, and also controlling the Infinity Gauntlet, like there's no way you could confuse him. Like it makes a lot of sense that he's stalwart. I think I do enjoy him more than Red Skull and Magneto. He's so I'd add him on the fun like up here. And the difficulty, he is easier than Loki on average, I think. Yeah, he's probably somewhere around here. I think he's a bit easier than Magneto. Yeah, that feels about right to me. Proxima Midnight. So this is the tower defense one, which is actually one of my favorite scenarios, but I've never lost because it feels like this is my top left corner. Even on expert mode, I've never lost, and I've played this scenario more than 10 times. And yeah, it just is a very fun scenario. I like the idea of defending the tower. It's just that the tower can take so much damage that uh you can't really. It feels like as long as you're willing to flip down and heal, like you can't really lose. So I'm not sure. Like in the campaign, it makes a lot of sense that the Avengers, of course, they can deal with Proxima Midnight and Corvus Glaive, but it just changes how the campaign functions later based off whether the tower gets damaged or not. So I feel like it's more of a like the campaign was focused more so with this scenario than the standalone scenario, but I do really like the standalone scenario. It's just kind of too easy, but you can also play it and just say that if the tower gets damaged, you lose, and that kind of fixes a lot of the difficulty problems, I think. So I'm going to put it up here. One of my favorites, very easy. On to Ultron. So Ultron is like the OG difficult villain into the campaign box one. He's the final villain of the campaign of the core box, and every time I play him, it's been a blast. Like he his mechanic of taking your cards off of your deck and turning them into drones just feels like Ultron to me. Like he's using your resources against you. and it interacts with heroes in very different ways. Some heroes don't really care. Some heroes care a lot. But I get why people might not like that, but I've had a great time with it. Uh, he's one of my go-to villains when I'm looking like I want to have a challenge. And the fact that he has aged this well and his difficulty feels this like it's been like a standard of the game for this long when it came out in the core box is incredible to me. Yeah, he is very difficult on expert, and you kind of have to build a deck to beat him, which is maybe if you don't like deck building that much and you just like playing the game, you probably won't like Ultron that much. But if you enjoy like theory crafting with decks and a lot, and you don't mind your cards being turned against you, which a lot of people don't like, then he's a great villain. One of my favorites. His difficulty, I it's interesting because when you build a deck specifically to beat him, his difficulty isn't quite as hard as these guys, I don't think. But if you don't build a deck specifically to beat him, his difficulty is definitely in here. So I'll probably average that out. Like, let's say we're playing a character that's good, like Black Panther, because he can take out the drones really easily. Oh, or Captain America with the retaliate. And you build your deck with Ultron in mind. I think he's still more difficult than these villains. So I'm gonna place him probably about here on difficulty. And for fun, he's towards the top for me. Now Venom Goblin. Again, another final villain. His he it's kind of interesting because I played Venom Goblin before I played Green Goblin. So I didn't really realize like how they kind of took what Green Goblin does and just turned it into a symbiote. I didn't know that Green Goblin existed at the time, or I knew he existed, but I didn't know how he functioned. So now I have kind of a different perspective on him, and it's definitely didn't make it any worse. If anything, it made it cooler that Venom Goblin is like that. And the idea of like you're trying to capture the whole city and like save the whole city is more evident with Venom Goblin because you have those three main schemes, and it feels like you're just chasing him around trying to keep everything in control, but you just can't. And it's a good time. I definitely wouldn't, similar to most of these villains on this side, I wouldn't just take him out of the box and play him if I wasn't in the mood to play him. But he's great. So uh, his glider is worth mentioning. The activating against you twice can be absolutely brutal, and you got to get rid of that as soon as you can. So for difficulty, he's easier than Ronin, I think, because it feels like with Ronin you can just get one shot at any point, and that's less true with Venom Goblin. Because like if you get Venom Goblin under control and you get your setup, then you can actually deal with him. So I think he's probably somewhere in here for difficulty. I enjoy him more than Loki, less than Ultron, probably less than Red Skull. I don't know. He's probably about here. That feels good to me. Venom. Okay, another Sinister Motives villain. I have played him more than Mysterio and Sandman, so he's gonna be above them on this tier list. I He has the whole bell tower thing that you have to flip, which can be can be weird because like I've had really varied experiences playing Venom because most of the time I've played him, I've been playing a hero that kind of like breaks the rules. So like Star Lord, for instance, was one of the heroes I played against him, and I dealt myself like a bunch of encounter cards, and then I damaged him multiple times, like with my attacks and readying, and then my element guns and my allies. So I had like 11 boost cards or something, and then when he attacked me, I just used Bad Boy, and then I blocked his entire like 13 card boost attack that he did against me. And then it was really funny. It's like I don't know. He's a very swingy villain, and I think he is more interesting than Rhino, and more interesting than Magog. He's more complicated than Magog, but they're both very interesting. I think he's probably about even with Magog, but on fun, but shifted towards the hard. Oh, well, that's interesting. So I have like a clear trend here, a diagonal line with all of the Sinister Motives ones. So I kind of want to look for that. It's like Sinister Motives is a diagonal line this way for me. Guardians is a here, 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 here. So Guardians is a vertical line over here, with Drang being an outlier. The core box is roughly a diagonal line like that. And then what else? Red Skull is well, let's do Zemo. Zola first. So Zola, I do find to be difficult. He, I lost to him using a Captain Marvel deck that I took on a lot of different expert villains with, and had easy times. Like when I played through the campaign with that Captain Marvel deck, I dealt with Red Skull and won, but I actually lost. Zola was the only one I lost to. I don't think he's more difficult than Red Skull, but you kind of need someone that can take out a lot of minions. He's definitely hard. He's somewhere in here. Difficulty, fun. He is more fun than Taskmaster, so it might seem like I'm being biased, but the the diagonal line has formed, but with Absorbing Man as an outlier because he's a bit too easy is all. Yeah, he's a bit too easy. That's really all it is. And then okay, I just played this today. This is one of the main reasons I'm making this video, is because the Wrecking Crew was the last thing that I hadn't played before Age of Apocalypse came out, and it was a blast. It was really fun. It was sort of ridiculous how much space it took up, with having four villains with four decks and four discard piles, and then the main scheme. It was obnoxious how much space it took up, but most people that play games have a table, so that's not a detriment to this at all. It was felt so unique. So like the idea of like all of them are out there, one of them is active against you, and then you just sort of pick them off. It was a great time. It felt really thematic. I want to try this with more different heroes. But so this is a first impression video. Uh, I was playing with it was a 2-player game, and one of us died. So it definitely wasn't easy. Uh, Fun. Yeah, I think this is definitely a hot take, but I'm gonna put Wrecking Crew up in here. Probably like there, probably like about the same difficulty as Thanos, but very fun. Something like that. That feels. There's my hot take of the video. So now on to all of the next evolution stuff. So these two scenarios are kind of like uh I need to play them more, but they're kind of like meshed together in my head. It was this one, I think, where I've never had a difficult time with it, but there's one of the villains that was really difficult. I think it was I played the Avengers Mansion. Can't remember what the name was, but my Avengers Mansion just got discarded, and it was very difficult. So like what villain seems to greatly change this, which was really fun. I like the idea of having all the multiple villains, and seeing how like Wrecking Crew evolved into Sinister Motives, which evolved into these two scenarios. It's really cool. Uh, for difficulty, this one I had more trouble with it than the other one. They're both pretty fun, but I don't think I had particularly more fun than Rhino with it. So I'd probably go there, somewhere in there. They're kind of lumped together in my head. They are different scenarios, but they're also a lot to keep track of. They're easier than Zola, harder than Rhino. I have about that much fun with them. Juggernaut is one of my favorites from the box. Like, so this is kind of I probably need to move these down in fun, because I I remember Juggernaut very well, but these two didn't stand out to me that much. Juggernaut is one of the most thematic villains in the game. Like, he feels unstoppable when you're playing against him, and it's like the fact that he can attack you in alter ego mode is unique to have that in the game, and it just feels right. Like, it's fun, it's thematic, and difficult. Not like when I played through the campaign, this is the only villain that I lost to when my first time through the box with Cable and Domino. Uh, Like I lost once or twice and then beat him the third time without like deck building specifically to beat him. So like he's definitely easier than this group of people over here, but it's probably somewhere in here in difficulty, but very fun. So I don't like it as much as I don't like it as much as Toad, but I think it's more. I'm not sure if it's more difficult there. And then Mr. Sinister is also really interesting. The modular sets that shuffle in will change it each time on what happens. So like he'll steal your superpowers, and it was really fun when I played that, and it felt thematic with Mr. Sinister. I didn't find him to be that difficult. I don't think I've lost to Mr. Sinister before, so he's probably around here in difficulty. And I don't know. I enjoy Rhino a bit more than Mr. Sinister, so I'll place him there. And then Strife is the last villain. Strife, I want to play more, but he has that mechanic of increasing your card costs, which is an interesting twist that I haven't seen on other villains. I think he's harder than Mr. Sinister. He's definitely easier than Juggernaut, but I didn't have particularly more fun playing against him than Mr. Sinister. So I think about there. And then that wraps up my tier list, which apparently my opinion on the game is that it's a diagonal line where the difficulty and fun generally increases, but with a handful of outliers in each of the corners. So let me know what you think about the villains, and I'll see you in the next one.